To AM News.
Morning, and thank you too.
Now, this World Economic Forum on Africa conference is said to have grown in terms of delegates attending the conference. What can we read from this particular attendance?
I think two things. A, we are seeing the realization of the fact that Africa is the next destination in terms of economic opportunities, in terms of tapping into what will turn to be probably a turnaround from a continent with seen as less productive, pathetic, you can add all the adjectives, to a continent that is highly promising, with very energetic youth, and with level of stability that could bring some environment for creating economic opportunities that was untold 20 years ago.
Definitely a continent to look at, but since its inception of this particular conference, in your view, has this conference came up with any meaningful, concrete resolutions that took the continent forward over the last 25 years?
One would debate and argue, in my view as an economist, no. The fact is, the level of poverty in Africa, the level of inequality, has been one of the issues many people tend to avoid. Truth is that until Africa wakes up to say, we cannot live in a continent with all these opportunities and majority of our people are living in abject poverty. We need to change the paradigm shift. The debate is no longer in the hearts of politicians. It should be in the hearts of academics like us to argue, tell us why all we hear are investment into and investment out. We hear of opportunities being brought into the continent. What people don't understand is what happens in terms of these companies in view of their impact to the society. It's one thing to create profits. It's another thing to create abject poverty. We need to change the paradigm shift because I travel worldwide. And when you travel to, let's say, Middle East, it would be unacceptable for anybody to run a company in Middle East if the people from Middle East don't have the majority shares. If I go to Europe, you struggle sometimes, of course, to get a place to have a good meal because of Africa. But yet, when all these multinationals come here, it's heaven for them. We need to keep on asking, for how long will African be a conduit for people to create wealth? Because one can argue this predates the days of colonialism. And until this is put into the forefront by all of us, we will not change the continent view in terms of the relationship of the haves and the have-nots.
Former President Thabo Mbeki talked about illicit capital flows out of the country. You've just mentioned it as well. But is there perhaps a sense that Africa or Africans are not the beneficiaries of our own resource wealth that we have?
That's not debatable. That's a fact. However, there is hope because we teach young people, we are teaching youth. The growth of middle income among the youth is the fastest growing. We are seeing that, with all due respect, in 2006, we had barely 13 African economies classified as middle income. Today, we are seeing they're about 22, 23. It's predicted it will be about 35 countries in 2030. At that rate, then we'll be able to say, listen, we are capable of being our own. The critical element is to ask the question, if we are all associated with the natural resources, commodities, you name all of them, how come these commodities? Because they are literally underground or they are literally within the space of hydropower, you name it. How come the rural people and the people who sit among them are the least to benefit from? If you look at the issues of now what we are doing, either the government or whoever is paying the miners who have lung diseases, hundreds and hundreds of them. Are you telling me these companies who are now saying we need to address the pain these people have endured for 30 decades and decades, how unfair can it be And until these companies are held to account, and tell me, is it wise to continue with the trajectory of growth the way we see it when majority of people don't realize it? That's the question academics need to ask.
Now, among the issues expected to be discussed in the conference is, of course, security on the African continent, job creation and skills development in Africa. What can we expect, do you think, at the end of this conference? Anything different, or is it just another talk shop?
Well, there will be some companies that will come to realization of that, but also, let's face it, look, it's one thing to bring people to network. It's another thing to ask what are the factual, fundamental realization of benefit to the continent, because that's the question. Of course, in many cases, our government let us down because it's easier to be able to address and talk, but we literally look at what we call FDIs, because that's what we are looking forward to, without underpinning the objective of saying it can't be business as usual, where you bring X amount and you take X plus, but the people that are part of the system are left with the negatives. That's the question. The second issue is, when you look at the security, yes, can I ask you a question? Where do you think the African could lead to insecurity? It's not really people are about to kill each other. It's the poverty. When people are helpless and they are seeing through the technology we have today, all they are seeing is the beauty of other people living nicely. You tend to be despondent. You tend to be helpless. You tend to start questioning the fundamentals of why some people are so privileged and you are not. It's not that they hate each other. It's the reality they face every day and then. If everybody was to live middle class with affording good food, good place, educating their children, good health, you think we'll be insecure? Forget it. But those are the fundamental issues we need to address. Like I said, we need a paradigm shift rather than talk show.
Zimbabwe was once seen on this African continent as the breadbasket of Africa. Today, it's a different story. It's many African countries, but there's a turnaround apparently. But at the end of this forum, Doctor, do you perhaps see, and not just talking about Zimbabwe, but the entire continent, for every African on this continent, would we see something different? Would it make a difference at the end of the day for the ordinary African, not just for heads of state or politicians and so forth?
You see, the media project images that I don't believe they are realistic often.
Yes.
We tend to show the beauty of what it is to be good. But the objective of media, in my case, is to give a very wide scope of the realities on the ground. Yes, the African people are facing poverty and problem, but there is a need also to acknowledge their positive changes. Look, the case of Zimbabwe, people are realizing probably, and I'm saying that for the first time, I don't think it was a wrong move to say African need to own some shares of the businesses in this country. Today, we are hearing the small-scale farmers are now turning around the commodity production at a very high level. Today, you can't go and own a platinum mine in Zim without making sure Zim people own majority shares. I can't argue with that. Yes. Only a fool would argue that's unfair. So we are seeing maybe, and this is what our children may be able to address, and your children, to say, how long shall we be the benefactors of others to do well, rather than for all of us? And by the way, African people don't say, let it be owned by us. They are saying, have fair play. Can I ask you a question? How many companies do you know 30, 40 years ago created pension fund for black people to live comfortable 20 years after they retire? Very few.
Not many that I know.
So we need to start asking fundamental questions without being apologetic or without looking like we are afraid to tell the truth.
Some of the solutions, perhaps, Doctor, that could come out of this particular conference, the World Economic Forum on Africa?
Well, of course, there will be a lot of money put into infrastructure. Everybody knows the growth in Africa could reach up to 80% on average, despite all what we hear about Eastern Europe. I hope South Africa will also change, because outside South Africa, on average, the growth is about 6%, even today in Nigeria. We are also hoping there will be some understanding of that the commodity prices are declining at a very fast rate, and that will hit the African economy very hard. How do we mitigate against that? Maybe they will address that. The question of unemployment cannot be fixed overnight, but it is upon us to start making our youth become highly literate, highly competitive, and self-assertive. Self-assertive means you don't apologize. Even if you are not educated, don't exploit me. Those are the fundamentals economists are saying. We realize that it is no longer a debate. It's a question of saying our youth become assertive, tell the truth, run away from corruption, because corruption is also killing the continent. And I think what we are reading now with the president of Nigeria coming with a very clear position of corruption, what we are seeing happening in East Africa, especially Kenya, on corruption, what we're also seeing happening even in Ghana, we could see a little bit of mitigating against upward sliding of corruption and bringing it down. People will ask me, what do I say about South Africa?
Yes.
We hope they will control it at some stage, because it's one of the worst long-term eating away of opportunities untold in mankind. Corruption is that bad.
Doctor, as usual, thank you so much for joining us here in studio.
Welcome.
Now that was Dr. Peter Karungu. He's an economist, an economic analyst, chatting to us about the World Economic Forum and what might just emerge from there. Let's now move on. The Reserve Bank says that the exchange rate remains the